Thank
We'll
you.
we'll start in something like 10 minutes. There
Yes.
are also some people we're waiting for. So
Mhm.
we'll something like 10 minutes and
Yeah,
we
yeah,
will start.
I'm ready. Thank you very much. And thanks also to your kind colleague from the technical department. I
Yes,
just
he's doing his best.
and there's only one map. I think it's easier.
Mhm.
I don't want to waste our short time with the PowerPoint presentation. It's better to interact as much as possible. But there's one map. I just sent you a presentation I did yesterday for the
Mhm.
Youth Parliament. It's mostly about the European Union. But if you see on your Telegram, there is one map we could discuss. It's the Eurasia map at the very end. It's slide 5, I think.
on the behalf of the Council of Young Researchers of the Moscow State Linguistic University, and we are also honored to welcome the rector, the president of our university, Mrs. Kraeva. So we would like to pass the floor to you.
Thank you so much. Honorable guests, dear colleagues, dear students, let me give you my warmest welcome to the third scientific conference dedicated to research and practice in humanities and social sciences. The title of the conference is Inyaz Readings, Инязовские чтения. And for the sake of our guests, perhaps I should explain that Inyaz is the old and very affectionate name for Moscow State Linguistic University. In this way, the conference reflects on our 95-year-old traditions and achievements in various research domains, bringing together the multiple ways of studying human beings, their cognition and languages in their social and cultural habitats. Inyaz Readings is a very special event. It is organized by the university's Young Researchers Council. Thank you, dear friends and colleagues. And from its very beginning, it turned out to be a huge success. Last year, for example, we hosted more than 400 participants from 5 countries, 33 cities, and 74 research institutes. And this year is no exception. So I would like to thank you all for coming here and for giving us the opportunity to discuss with you lots of very exciting topics, such as the recent trends in linguistics, the future of cognitive and social studies in the era of digital expansion, which is very important now, modern literary and culture research, translation, interpretation, and artificial intelligence, of course, and many others. And it is by no chance that these issues will be brought up here at Moscow State Linguistic University that has always blended tradition with the most relevant topics of modern times. This conference is remarkable in yet another way. It is my greatest pleasure and honor to introduce a very special guest, Mrs. Karen Kneissel. Your Excellency, welcome to Moscow State Linguistic University. Karen Kneissel is a person of science, a person of politics, a person of culture and brilliant education. Karen speaks 9 languages, which brings her very close to us. And she never stops exploring the world, sharing her knowledge and invaluable experience with new generations of students and young researchers. I believe that Mrs. Kneissel is the embodiment of everything we strive to foster here within these walls. Karen's talk today touches upon many spheres of modern life, and it is titled The Return of Geography, Why Geopolitics Matters. Let's give Karen our very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Shall I?
So Karen, please, the floor is yours. You see
Thank you very much.
the hall is full, so they are longing to listen to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Rector. Thank you very much, Alina, for your kind words of introduction. Let me first of all apologize that I cannot be physically with you. Alina has offered to organize my komandirovka, by the way, one of my favorite Russian words. It's a true Russian word, to come and see you in Presentia. But unfortunately, between yesterday and today, there are some other commitments. But I am confident that there will be an occasion in the future, near future, that we will see each other. And it will be my sincere pleasure to come. And it's a different atmosphere when you discuss with each other offline. First of all, let me also wish you a fruitful and inspiring Congress. I listened carefully to the introduction, what will be your topics. And some of the topics are also on the agenda of the Institute. I found it here last summer. And when I suggested topics to Alina, one was about the return of geography, because this is for several reasons, I would say, a current priority, not only for political decision makers, but especially for Russians altogether, regardless of which path of life you come from. Here I would also like to draw your attention to what we do here at the GORKI. GORKI is an acronym which stands for Geopolitical Observatory for Russia's Key Issues. And we deal inter alia with geopolitical debates such as the new alliances, the tectonic shifts of geopolitics that we see, which goes hand in hand also with the shifts in the Russian export market of its main commodities. Where we also see that whenever it comes to military conflict, it's today about the return of certain geographical facts. It's not only about different ideological schools of thinking which dominated the 20th century. It's certainly about control of rivers, mountain ranges, something that we have seen throughout human history for thousands of years. And this I would like to elaborate for about 15-20 minutes, and then I'm open for your questions, whether it's on this topic or whether it's on other topics, such as why studying languages in times of artificial intelligence and algorithms is still worthwhile and makes a difference. So when we speak about geopolitics, what do we mean by that? I always break it down to the idea that where geography and history meet, there is no clear definition of geopolitics. It's a fairly young discipline. The first geopolitical institutes that carried that name actually stem from the 1940s, 50s. And the first thinkers of geopolitics were in Scandinavia, Mr. Kierland, but then it was above all in Germany, in the context of the German war preparations, and then the war, especially what they called, and I put it now in inverted commas, it's all about this expansion to the east. You might know from your English classes that there are several terms from the German language which are translated tel quel. They are used in German, in English, but also in French and other languages, because it was very much this military and expansionist thinking that we had in the Germany of the 1930s. So it's inter alia Carl Schmitt, it's Mr. Ratzhofer, who were the main thinkers. And when you read the summaries of their biographies, it's mostly, the bottom line is, well, they were the ideologues of the National Socialist enterprise. This is true to a certain extent, even so it does not apply to each and every of those persons, those thinkers, ideologues, whatever one might call them. But one of the consequences of this geopolitical role that we saw in the Germany of the 1930s and 40s, the main consequence was that all geopolitical thinking afterwards stopped in the German-speaking world by and large. There was no single publication, there was no institute, it was not at all fostered as a concept because of what happened in World War II. Geopolitical thinking as such moved west, it moved transatlantic, and we saw it then with the main national security thinkers in the United States. One of them, maybe the most familiar you might be with, he passed away only recently, former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. He definitely was one of these geopolitical thinkers, and there are some others who shaped the entire Cold War thinking, but who also were busy in brokering new alliances, such as the diplomatic shift from Taiwan to the People's Republic of China, in which Kissinger was very, very much involved in the late 60s, early 1970s. And there was no geopolitical thinking at all on the European continent, with the little exception, if I may say, in France. And when I was a student of your age, I became interested in everything that had to do with geography, international relations, history, even. So I studied law and was not I only ventured into these areas as an autodidact on my own, trying to get hold of books. It was in the 1980s, long before the era of the internet. But I simply tried to get hold of books, publications, quarterlies, and those I mostly found in France, in French. And there's, for instance, one institute, it's called l'Observatoire Géopolitique of Lyon. And that because when I was thinking about a good name, a good title for our institute, I took the O for observatoire, because if I may explain, as there were some reflections here among colleagues at St. Petersburg State University how to call such a center, and the proposals I read were like long titles going for 3-4 lines, and I said, no, nobody can express that, and it's much too complicated to read the acronym. So I wanted to find an acronym that also means something, and I did with myself a brainstorming for half a night in May, and I chose the title Gorky because everybody knows what Gorky means, who was Gorky, but I made the dots in between, so not to mix it up with the Gorky libraries or Maxim Gorky as such. But the notion of observatoire, many Russians ask me whether we are a planetarium watching the stars, and I say no. In French, observatoire is a center. It's there where you watch, where you try to understand the world, and this is why I chose it. So I come back from my little footnote on the Gorky, and would like to move on the development of geopolitics in the European context. So after World War II, there was no thinking at all when it comes to geography, history, how they interact, what it means to define national interest, how to define national security. That was done in the United States. It was done in the Anglo-Saxon world. Define interests. The Europeans of the 1950s, 60s, 70s were not defining interests. All what happened in terms of European integration was about markets. It was about bringing together economies, making them easier to interact. So you reduce tariffs, you create one custom union, you work together on certain topics that are of common economic interest. I mention that because for about 30 years, whenever we spoke about European integration, it was about macroeconomics. It was not about defining together a political strategy. It was not about sanctioning. It was not about military matters. And I like now a jump to the year 2019. In December 2019, the current European Commission took office. And in her opening speech, Ursula von der Leyen, who before was German Minister of Defense, not a very successful one, she made a very clear statement in her speech saying, this will be the first geopolitical European Commission. When I listened to that speech, I was wondering, how come that the European Commission is now engaging in geopolitics? It will be very, very difficult because they simply never did geopolitics. First of all, there is no school of geopolitical thinking. There are not people who are well educated, who have ever been active. The European Commission is full of political scientists, but it lacks historians, it lacks geographers, and it lacks those who really know what geopolitics are about. Those you will find, I'm now speaking to you from somebody from a very Western perspective, you will find them transatlantic in Washington, you will find them in US universities, you will find London, and also, as I mentioned beforehand, in some French-speaking regions. But from a German-speaking perspective, from an EU perspective, and also as a reminder, the European integration started off as European communities, and in the 1990s it turned into a political union, but still a far cry away from what you would call geopolitical approach to the rest of the world. Now, in 2019, that new commission took office, and it was all about geopolitics. And I was wondering, what do they mean by that? Now, in 2022, with the events, with the special military operation, with all what happened on the 24th of February 2022, and in the aftermath of that, you would see a total change of language within the European Union representatives, whether it's on the Commission basis, whether it's in the capitals among the EU members. What we called in German the Friedensprojekt, the peace project, gave way to a new, very military approach to the rest of the world, especially to Russia, but not only Russia. And it was all about deciding in the battlefield. Josep Borrell, the High Representative of the European Union, you can also call him the Foreign Minister of the European Union, even so he can only coordinate, he cannot speak for all the rest. He said inter alia in April 2022, the fate of Ukraine, what is going on now, will not be decided by diplomacy, it will be decided on the battlefield. So he spoke constantly of the language of strength, of the language of military needs. And this is right now reaching a sort of peak. We will see where this peak later on leads, whether it will go to more confrontation or whether there will be a vote towards some other venues that could also be tried, such as diplomacy. And here we are, that right now it's all about this new terms of we have to define interests, and these interests are defined mostly in a sort of military way. It's all about confrontation. Now, so much about the European Union and about what is going on right now in Brussels. If we take a step back and look at the overall larger picture, let me draw your attention to the beginning of this year, the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. They meet, and it's a big gathering of the business by and large, but you also will find their political representatives. The World Economic Forum also does research and publications. And prior to the opening in January this year, they published a survey in which they said we contacted about 1,700 big companies worldwide, and we asked them, what is your priority? Is it about climate change? Is it about terrorism? Is it about pandemics? As we have seen over the last years, priorities shifted. And the majority, the vast majority of those who had been contacted answered, our priority is geopolitics. We know, we feel that all of a sudden, our companies might be facing tremendous problems because of a geopolitical tournament. And we could see the few weeks later with the new situation in the Red Sea, blocking vessels that have a connection to the UK, to Israel, to the United States. They face problems, and these problems they face lead also to the consequence that insurance companies are not anymore ready to insure these trade vessels, so they have to take a longer freight route around Africa instead of going through the Suez Channel and then reaching the European market. So this is just one example among many others where you could see that geography is back. It matters whether you have to go around Africa, whether you might maybe even go for the northern route from Murmansk to Vladivostok. This is a debate that is also going on, that we also do here at the Gorki. Tomorrow we will have a one-day seminar on the northern sea route, to what extent it might have a new dynamic because of geopolitical reasons, because the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, has become more difficult to cross. So geography is back on several levels. And if I may ask Alina is it possible for you to bring in this one map that I have on the presentation, if it's possible?
Yes, sure. Можно
Thank you very much.
пожалуйста?
It's only one map that I want to share with you.
Нам нужна карта.
Да, спасибо. It's all about Eurasia.
Там чуть-чуть подальше.
This one, the pivot area. There was a famous article by a British geographer called Harold Mackinder, and any person, any scholar who talks about geopolitics will always come back to this map and to Mr. Mackinder's article, which he published 120 years ago in 1904. He did not yet use the word geopolitics, but the concept that he presented about the heartland, the pivot area, it is with us. You can see it in today's international relations. What you see on this map is a pivot area, which is more or less covering Russia, Central Asia. It's Eurasia. You see, Europe is a tiny annex to this large Eurasia. And the main conclusion of that article by Mackinder was, who controls Eastern Europe controls Eurasia, and who controls Eurasia controls the world. This was the conclusion. And this is something that is reflected in the various efforts, interventions that we have seen ever since the 1990s with the breakup of the former Soviet Union, but also with the breakup of Yugoslavia, with the breakup of a whole international order that existed until the late 1980s, early 1990s. So reading a map, defining geographical interests, it's all about also this notion of strategic depths was a topic throughout the 20th century. It's back today after a period where we have seen ideological confrontation, where we have seen confrontation in the name of ethnicity, in the name of religion, when we think of the various wars that the West has conducted in several states in Western Asia. By the way, personally, I refrain from using the word Middle East, because Middle East is a typical British concept of looking at the world. It's going east from London, it's the Middle East. In Russian, it's the Near East. In German, it's the Near East because it's closer to Europe. But I would call it West Asia, as some people do. It's also a notion in the United Nations, because those countries from Turkey via the Arab world, going into the Arabian Peninsula, going into Iran, all important actors, not only on a regional level, but also when it's about global energy. So they are, geographically speaking, part of West Asia. And this Asian reassertiveness, we are back to politics, whether it's from a Chinese point of view, whether it's from an Indian point of view, it matters. And the centers are moving east. It's not only because of the current geopolitical situation, it also has to do with demography, and it's maybe even the pendulum of history that is going east. And here, let me conclude with one quote by Otto von Bismarck, who was one of the representatives of Realpolitik. By the way, also a German word that you take into, that was translated as such, or never translated. It's used in English, it's used in French. I don't know whether it's also used as such as Realpolitik in Russian. I apologize, I'm not aware of that. But Otto von Bismarck said the following, and with this I'd like to conclude and wait for your questions. He said in German, Geographie ist die Konstante der Geschichte. Geography is the constant factor of history. And we can feel it in the year 2024, to what extent that is true. So on this point, I will stop my interventions, and I'm grateful for your professor, Abdieva, who also happens to be my voice in Russian when I speak on certain TV programs. So many thanks, and the floor is yours.
Karin, so firstly, thank you so much for the speech. Сейчас презентацию можно закрыть. Спасибо.
Yeah.
So now we would like to ask if someone has the questions. I guess that we do have the questions. And as far as I know, the first question, yes, would belong to the Vice Rector of our University for Sciences. I guess it's Dr. Dr. Iris Khanova.
It's fine. Hello again, Karin. Thank you so much. My name is Olga, and I'm Vice Rector for Research, as you've heard, and I'm a cognitive linguist. So my question will be connected with research, first of all, and linguistics as well. Thank you for bringing our attention to geography and geopolitical thinking. And my question is, if we look at this area as an area for research, do you see the place for linguistics there? And if you do, what is the place of studying languages, learning languages, of course, but studying languages as well in this multidisciplinary and very diverse area? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Rector. Thank you, Olga. My ad hoc answer, without now having given too much thought about that, is first of all, I think we have to be aware that English, because it's so easy, and it matters also for artificial intelligence, because a lot of translation, when I, for instance, do algorithm, I use translating machine, let's say Russian, French, it will always go via English. It will not be Russian, French directly. So in order to reflect in a better way this diverse thinking, because it's not only about the terms that you use, it's always also what is meant by those terms. And this needs, I think, also for the algorithms that you do, for the way you teach languages, and nobody of us will escape those algorithms, because everybody is taking recourse, or we are confronted with them by other instruments. So I think there is need for bringing in the pluralism. Let's call it pluralism, you know, because it's the pluralism of languages and of thinking, because it's relatively easy, if I may dare to say, to reflect this shift from a unipolar world to a multipolar world by new trade agreements, by exchange of academic work, and it also has a military dimension. We cannot ignore it. This might sound a bit strange from my side if I say it's relatively easy, because the true momentum will be in what way will we really be able to reflect this new pluralism of thinking. Because my feeling is, it's more a gut feeling, I have no empirical evidence on that, that English, for the time being, as the lingua franca, especially in all information technology, will continue to shape the language and the perception. And there we can see that the other languages, such as Russian, such as the two main languages that make standard Chinese, I'm not so familiar with Chinese, I'm more into Arabic and other Oriental languages. But if I take, for instance, Arabic, which I'm closer to, big issue, and I was shocked when I saw it also as a minister hosting my colleagues, the foreign ministers of the Arab League, they prefer to speak English among each other. So here we are, and it needs a renaissance, a real reawakening of languages. You need, I like this Russian word for lexicon, because it's the dictionary as such, and it's much more than a dictionary. So we need a new lexicon, and I'm very much impressed by the importance of philology in the Russian universities. It's not at all the case in Austrian universities or in German universities. I know maybe in France much more, but there's really need for philologists to work together and to reflect these new realities in a more pluralist use also of languages, because we are all stuck with an English-dominated vocabulary.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
So if anyone has the question, you are free to ask. I remind you of the rules. We do it in English, but if you do the question in French or in German, please do translate it. Yes, please. Надо включить микрофон.
Ja, danke schön für Ihre Leistung. Wir wissen, dass Sie Ungarisch gelernt haben. Wie schwer war es?
The question of your colleague is about Wengarski, about Hungarian. So he's aware that, or you are aware that I inter alia studied Hungarian, and how difficult is Hungarian. When people ask me, why did you study Hungarian? I tell the truth, because sometimes they think, you maybe in love with a Hungarian man and you ventured into Hungarian. No, it was the Hungarian horses. I studied Hungarian in order to speak to the horses. This might now sound a very, very strange approach, but let me put you into the context of the whole thing. In early 1990s, when it was much easier to travel from Austria eastward and back to geography, Austria, as a small Central European country, is neighboring a number of countries that for decades we did not have any human exchange, no economic exchange. It was Czechoslovakia before the breakup into Czech and Slovak republics, Hungary, Yugoslavia to the south, which has broken up ever since into 7 successor states. So when I was a young diplomat, I was about 24 when I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There was the very nice offer by the ministry to do language courses of the neighboring countries. And I was then a passionate writer, and I went to Hungary as often as I could, because from my place where I lived in Austria, I was in 20 minutes in Hungary, and I was in 1 hour close to Budapest, where I knew an old stable where I spent nearly every second weekend and much time, because I liked the people, I liked the horses. And it makes a difference whether you speak to a horse in German or in its mother tongue, Hungarian. It makes a huge difference. And I wanted to speak to the people in the stable, apart from Unabot and Shiveshen. I wanted to speak because they managed in broken German, and I felt very embarrassed not being able to converse with them. So I joined a course that was offered by the ministry to study Hungarian. And it was a bit difficult, yes, but for me, I was so much motivated because I went like every second weekend to Hungary. And there was a moment when I spoke it fairly well in the early 1990s. I must say, both Hungarian and Hebrew, I don't use at all. So it would take me a few days if I come back to get back into the language. English, French, Arabic, I use very often, also Spanish. So I'm very much at ease in those languages. But to conclude with a little anecdote, I was invited by György Esterházy. He is the brother of a writer, Peter Esterházy, who has passed away. And it was a very simple evening in a small house there in the woods. And they were drinking and enjoying life. The Hungarians are very joyful people. And they told stories, and I understood a lot fairly well. And I made a very funny mistake. While they were talking, I said always elemes, elemes. And I thought it was Erdekes. Erdekes in Hungarian is interesting. So I wanted to say, oh, how interesting. But elemes is battery driven. So they were just thinking, what's that Austrian? You know, she repeats every 5 minutes, battery driven. But this is when you are, when you make mistakes in languages, and I can give you a long list of sometimes very embarrassing mistakes I committed in my early days of learning, also Spanish and Arabic. But when you do it with love, when you have a strong motivation, and my motivation were the horses, you can manage.
Dankeschön.
Gerne.
Next questions, please.
Hello, thank you so much for your interesting speech. I have a little question. Today, BRICS Plus is so much spoken about, and the question is, what do you think about the future of this integration unit, and what new participants should we admit for? And should it be able to create a new power polar? Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleague, for this very important question. It will be very interesting to see throughout this year, BRICS is now under Russian chairmanship, what will be the future institutional format of BRICS. because for the time being, it's a very loose format. You know, it's a forum where you meet, but it's not yet an international organization. From a Russian point of view, as far as I'm observing and reading, there is a certain desire to transform this forum of meeting, this meeting ground, into a fully fledged international organization. The United Nations is an international organization par excellence. It has a charter, it has its institutions. In the case of BRICS, we have certain institutions that are connected with BRICS, such as the BRICS Bank, that tries to develop a BRICS currency, but BRICS as such is not yet an institution. Now, the Russian point of view is let's turn it into an international organization, while as far as I'm observing, I'm a very distant observer, but maybe I will have more chance to see closer during one of the conferences that will be held this year, what is the current state of debate. And as far as I've understood from China's side, maybe for the time being, I'm just, guessing, I cannot give you a clear-cut account on that. My impression is that they would prefer to keep it in this loose format. For India, we will see. And those who recently joined on the 1st of January, we have seen several West Asian states, such as Iran, such as the United Arab Emirates and other Arab countries joining BRICS Plus. This is very interesting because they are on a certain level also connected to the United States. And I can imagine that they're not very happy, especially the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, that they turn to this new institution, not yet the institution, to this new format. For Iran, it's a different story. Iran was sanctioned, boycotted, left alone on many, many levels within the world ever since the 1980s, 90s. So for Iran, it's an interesting new place where to belong to. And because you asked also this very important question of how many more members. Now, my advice would be, don't turn into too many, because this is the fundamental problem of the European Union. There are 27 around the table, and this is simply too much. All of you who are maybe active in some association, you know that if you want to get a discussion end in a real conclusion, you should not be more than, let's say, 10, 12 around the table, because otherwise it's simply too big. This is the real problem among many other problems of the European Union. So I am aware of the fact that there's a certain school of thought that would opt for, let's create BRICS Plus as an alternative to other big international organizations, maybe even as an alternative to the United Nations. I've heard such voices here in Russia among the academics. And there are others, I would be one of them, who say, don't grow too big, because then the decision-making will become too complicated.
Karen, thanks. We also have the next question already.
Dear Karen, thank you for your detailed description of what is happening now in the world. And I would like to ask you a question. What do you think about the relevance of European and Oriental languages in the world now? Because there is an opinion that European languages are now fading into the background. And what do you think about it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Very interesting, as somebody who has lived the 1980s and 90s, which were quite decisive for the shaping of today's European integration. Let me share with you one memory that is still very vivid in my head. In the early 1990s, with the breakup of Comecon, with the desire by especially Germany and France to enlarge the European Union, I lived then in France and studied in France, and the French were really afraid that the German language would take over. In the 1980s, when you wanted to work for the European institutions, you had to master well French. You wanted to do the concours, the entry exam, to work for one of the EU institutions. The exam you had to take was in French and in English, but French was more important because the European Commission was very much dominated by ex-politicians, decision makers who came from France. Jacques Delors was the president of the Commission, and he was a very active president of the Commission, and so it was all about French. In the early 1990s, I was in Paris, and I remember the fear, the anxiety by the French that the German might take over. They were convinced that because of the German presence, economic presence already, because as the tides changed in 1989, 1992, German export market went east. It went to Poland, it went to the Czech Republic, it went to the Baltics, and you would see how strong was the interest for German studies. So everybody was afraid that instead of speaking English in Brussels, people would speak German. And that was the debate. We saw then, especially with the enlargement of the European Union in 2004, when it turned from 15 to 25 members, it was all about English. No French. French has totally gone to the back front. This is a big dilemma for the French, because whoever among you is studying French, you might be aware that France also disposes of a ministry pour la francophonie. So they have a fully fledged ministry with huge funds that invests in the spreading of the French language. The French language remains a lingua franca, a means of communication in West Africa. So it's in North Africa, of course, also. So it's not like let's say Italian or Hungarian that plays not this role on a larger level, but it's used. It's a means of communication for millions of people. So the French were very much upset to see how the French language in international relations, especially inside the European Union, was more and more marginalized, was more and more pushed out. When it comes to German, for instance, I see it here also at St. Petersburg University, it's a big dilemma for students who are now, let's say, in the third years of German studies. When they started the German studying program, the world was a different one, and they had other professional opportunities on their own horizons than now. Some of the professors here have switched to combining, for instance, German with Turkish. So my first reaction was, oh, is it because of the 6 million Turks who live in Germany? But it's an interesting combination. If you study, because there was a question about Hungarian beforehand, maybe it's easier to combine Hungarian with Turkish, because there is a certain vocabulary, a very limited vocabulary, but there is a vocabulary that is shared between Hungarian and Turkish. Then German, Turkish, which have little to nothing to do with each other. But on a demographic level in Germany and in Austria, yes, it's a fact. So when it comes to languages like Slovene, very difficult. I know Slovenia quite well. I've been working there on a regular level in the early 2000s. I don't know for how long a language that is spoken by 1.4 million, 1.5 million can manage. Hungarians are very, very proud and active when it comes to their language. I come back to the question of the previous colleague. All films, even songs, Schlager, you know, that they are translated into Hungarian. You would not see films with subtitles. There's a very strong, I don't know whether it's still the fact, but a few years ago, all foreign films were synchronized, not with subtitles, synchronized, which is quite a financial effort, but it reflects their desire to keep the Hungarian language as in the forefront. Interesting development when you take, for instance, the breakup of Yugoslavia. 30 years ago, you would study Serbo-Croatian, and with Serbo-Croatian, you could find your way around from Ljubljana to Macedonia, Northern Macedonia. With the breakup of Yugoslavia, with this ethno-tribalism, ethno-nationalism, it was like every ethnicity, its language, its nation, its history. We have now the weird, I call it really the weird situation that there is Croatian, Serbian, and Bosnian, and Montenegrin even for some, which is nonsense, because it's one language. It's definitely not, I mean, on the book fairs, Frankfurt, Leipzig book fair, you would see a desk for Bosnian, a desk for Croatian, a desk for Serbian. And the differences are slight. I mean, when you take German, for instance, there's such a huge difference the way German is spoken in Hamburg or in Switzerland or in Austria. Huge differences in pronunciation and vocabulary. So I would still make a plea for their Serbo-Croatian, but I mean, of course, Spanish will have its future, and Portuguese, because they are also spoken in Latin America. So, and in the United States, above all, the United States is more and more turning into a Spanish-speaking country. But when it comes to those languages in the southeast of Europe, also when it comes to the Baltics, I can imagine that they will invest a lot in making their languages matter. For German, we will see. It's if you have to write a paper, you would like to investigate into that more. Given the demographic situation in a country like Germany, it's quite an interesting question, because the demographic changes are amazing. I would like to conclude here with one figure on Austria. I don't have the German figures in my head, but in Austria, you have now 23% of the population that was not born in Austria, 23%. In a city like Vienna, it's 34%. When you walk today through Vienna, you will hear Arabic, you will hear Pashto, you will hear Serbo-Croatian, Turkish, but it will be very, very difficult in the public transport, in the street, to hear proper German.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So now we have time just for one last question. A short one, please. Yes, sure.
Thanks a lot for the lecture. And you just mentioned about combination of German and Turkish. And what do you think about combining German and Arabic? And what language combination would you claim as the most beneficial one nowadays? Thank you.
Well, whenever students asked me for letters of recommendation throughout the last 20 years, and they wanted to do a postgraduate, mostly in the English-speaking world, North America, I told them, go east. And I did it already in 2005, 2010. I told them, go east, because it's not only about China, it's also about Malaysia. It's above all about those other Asian states, be it Vietnam, be it Indonesia. I mean, these are all important brokers. So I think the Asian languages as such will play a role. When it comes to your question, combining German Arabic, yes, I mean, I myself never regretted having studied Arabic. I was also very, very much motivated. I wanted to speak to the people. I wanted to live in Lebanon. I did it. And when I was kicked out from the European Union, I went to Lebanon because I happened to speak the language. I know the country. It was impossible then to move from France, from Europe to Russia. So I moved my animals and myself to Lebanon. The problem of Arabic, now that I'm studying Russian to the extent possible, I would say the drama of Arabic, if I would put it like that, the drama of Arabic is they never had a Pushkin. You know, they never had a Lermontov. When you want to understand the roots, the grammatical structure, the syntax, you go into the Quran, because the Quran remains like the standard reference for written classical Arabic. In contrast to the Russian legacy, you don't have writers, you don't have novels. Yes, you have some in Algeria, there's some, of course, you also have Naguib Mahfouz, who won a Nobel Prize for Literature, but many of those books are in a very regional, colloquial dialect. They are not in the classical Arabic, and Orientalists from Russian universities, just like me, when you arrive for the first time in the Arab world as such, you're stuck because the way you speak is, it makes people laugh. This is the problem with Arabic. I never regretted speaking classical Arabic. I insist on my classical Arabic. It makes people smile. They then try to reactivate their language classes decades ago. But this is a little caveat, a little point of attention that you have to bear in mind. Let's say you studied German and Arabic, and you work for a company that is active in Syria. Yes, in Syria, people speak very, very decent Arabic, top-level Arabic. Damascus used to be also a center, of course, of developing the Arab language. The country is suffering from many, many setbacks. So also the language development is suffering. But Egypt is a world by itself. Tunisia, you will see for all these Maghreb countries to what extent people always switch to French because it's easier for them. And in the Arabian Peninsula, for the simple fact that you have there such a huge presence of non-nationals. You have a country like Qatar, you have 300,000 Qataris, you have 3 million residents who are not Qataris. They are of all horizons, but not from Qatar. So the lingua franca in those countries is a pidgin English. You know, everybody speaks English somehow. So I never regretted having studied Arabic for many, many reasons. I always speak my standard classical Arabic. 30 years ago, they would say, you speak like the Soviet ambassador, which because the Soviet ambassadors spoke very, very good Arabic. One famous example is Yevgeny Primakov, later prime minister, president of, I think, also the Academy of Sciences, Oriental Academy and Academy of Sciences. So Yevgeny Primakov was this perfect example of Soviet ambassador who spoke excellent Arabic. If I may give you an advice, yes, go for it. Why not? Because you will enter into two very interesting worlds of thinking. it's I think that that West Asia, that Arab world, I do hope. I mean, it's my wish to them. I discussed it several times in the recent past. They have to renovate also their lexicon. It's last time that happened was in the 1890s. You know that there was this movement for Arab awakening, Renaissance, but they also need a new lexicon, and maybe Russian linguists can help them on that. But I would certainly encourage you to make such a combination.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, Karin, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the lecture. Thank you so much for the questions. You see that the hall is full, so that we were really honored and very glad to listen to you today. And I would also like to remind everyone present that you see a perfect example of a very famous researcher who knows a lot of languages, and you can see that everything is possible. So where the will, there's the way, and you can master even more than 2 languages or 3 languages that you study here and become a worldwide specialist. And if I dare say, Karin, we are extremely glad. You know, they told you that you were speaking like a Soviet ambassador. Maybe that was a sign for the destiny. Like now you are here in Russia, and we are very happy. And if I would dare, I would also like to kindly pass the invitation to come to our university in person when you will have the possibility. We would be happy to welcome you. That would be a great honor for us. So thank you again for having accepted the invitation. Thank you so much.
It's my sincere pleasure having interacted with you. And I think there's the vice rector who would like to take the floor again.
Sure. Olga Kmaldinina.
Oh yeah, just a few words, and I'd like to join invitation, of course, and we hope to see you personally very. And I have a small suggestion. We were lucky, really lucky, to have this talk, which actually touched upon so many questions that are really interesting to us, that I suggest that probably you'll think about giving a couple of lectures on geopolitical linguistics to us someday.
Yes, so that's a very, very nice idea. And I will stay in touch with Alina, for whom I also would like to express my sincere respect, how you manage in a very elegant way to cover your many, many activities as a mother, as a teacher, as an interpreter. So my sincere respect, Alina, for how you also put up that. And my journeys to Moscow, sometimes I know them in advance, sometimes it's that the TV station wants me at last notice, but in the long run, I will move to Ryazan Oblast. I'm renovating there a true ruin. So there are several demands from Moscow, and we are now putting this center on track so that it can function also without me being here. There's no need to be here 24 hours like I was in the beginning per day. And we can certainly put together such a course, because my profound conviction is the following. Those who know me personally, they know that I love animals. I live with lots of animals. And animals are fantastic. They only lack one thing. They cannot speak the way we speak. They speak with their eyes, with their instincts, with their bodies. But language is so important in interhuman connection relation. And the way language has degenerated today in diplomacy is a horror. What is said, how it is said, you know, it would have been unthinkable that the way it is done 20 years ago, unthinkable. It's a gangster language, the way it's used in diplomacy. You think that 2 gangs, you know, are shouting at each other, especially from the West. In Russia, you still have a lot of people who know how to pass the message in a clever way. But what I follow from my former colleagues, I ask myself, but why can you not employ a different language? So it's also about that. It's geopolitics, diplomacy, the need, the unconditional importance of having a correct, proper language in the way we interact in international relations. Now, this is not something exclusively for diplomacy, but with great pleasure we can work on something like that. And once I have my life in Ryazan Oblast, because I need a home, it will be also, it's not too far away from Moscow. It's 4.5 hours. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Then we will be waiting for it to happen. We would like to thank you once again. And just in order to finalize the discussion, I would also like to say that I'm always proud to be your Russian voice until you learn Russian, so that you won't need me anymore.
Yes, I am. I'm resolved. I'm fully determined. There are certain phrases I can say, but I hope maybe when I'm sitting in front of you at the tender age of 88, I hope I will be able to delve into Russian. Yeah. Good.
Well,
So,
thank you so much.
I wish you a good conference. Bye-bye.